Hello, this is Shield War 100 and welcome back to another game report. Trying something a little bit different this time. Don't worry, Batman will be back, but for now you degenerates can enjoy some historical wargaming, proper wargaming. Yes, this is how serious people play with toy soldiers. And yeah, I've had some historical armies painted up for a little while. This is one of them, and I really fancied doing something a bit different, so we're going to have a bit of a go at the Peloponnesian War, where Athens and Sparta faced off against each other in a truly horrific conflict that spanned several decades and beyond, actually. Yeah, I'm using the Hail Caesar rule set because it's a nice, easy rule set to use, especially if you're playing solo, where the dice rolls rule quite a lot of the command aspect of the game. So I won't be, it'll be down to the dice as much as my own judgment. And if I'm playing myself during lockdown, it's difficult to have people over. Then yeah, that will account for some interesting things and keep me interested. And the game a little bit more spontaneous. Right, so let's have a look at what forces are facing off against each other today. Starting off with the Spartan side of the table, I'm going to break down the unit makeup by division. It's a very small game, this, by Hail Caesar standards. It's actually based fairly loosely on the scenario given in the Hail Caesar rulebook, and yeah, so I thought I'd just emulate that a little bit. You don't need an awful lot of units for that one, and it looks like quite a fun little scenario to play myself. Right, so the first division on the Spartan side is the only one with actual Spartans in it, them being relatively few in number, and fairly disdainful of the numbers they would need to defeat their opponents. Right, so in the first, there's two divisions in the Spartan army. A division is basically a group of units commanded, led by a commander who orders them in this rule set. The Spartan general here is command value 9, which works a little bit like leadership roles in the old Warhammer games, but yes, that's a high number, point above average. He's befitting of a Spartan leader of the time. We have one phalanx of Spartans here, another phalanx of, but these are allies from nearby to Sparta probably, but not actual full Spartiates, as we would say. And a unit of light infantry peltasts to provide some screening cover there. The second division in the army is of allied city-states to Sparta, led by a general here. The generals just are on round bases. That's the way I differentiate them from the norm. Okay. As you can see behind, there are two units of allied hoplites, two phalanxes, heavy infantry, all phalanx in this regardless of what grade or where they come from, which nationality exactly. They're all heavy infantry, they're tough, shielded units. So I was figuring on my channel, it's about time I had some units which had something like a shield wall in it, since that's the name of my channel. What is that cat doing? I don't know. In front, the Allies have brought with them a unit of skirmishers, just armed with sticks, javelins, and another unit of light infantry peltasts. And that concludes the Spartan and Allies army, I would say. Task force is probably more like it, sent to clear the road to Boeotia from Athenians and their lackeys. Moving on to the forces fighting on the Athenian side, and their allies of course, we have the Boeotian contingent, which is representing a part of Greece which was nominally allied to Athens, but the Spartans, not the Spartans, we're not Martians, they're Spartans, invaded an attempt to sway to the other side, shall we say, because they believe that they could do so. We have the first of the two Athenian aligned divisions here, led by this commander, standard commander. He has two phalanx of Boeotian spearmen here. The one on the right for you is actually going to be counting as Levy phalanx, and they also have a unit of cavalry. It's only a small unit, so it probably won't be too impactful at this in this particular game, but the Greek armies of the time were not known for their oceans of cavalry sweeping across the plains at all. And finally a small unit of skirmishers, again just to round out the numbers because they turned up as reinforcements to their position as the Spartans moved into their territory. The Athenians sent some phalangites of their own, a small contingent, just to show that they would not be giving up this part of Greece without a fight. We have the Athenian commander here. He is a standard commander, command value 8. We have 3 phalanx of Athenian citizen hoplites, the ones at the front, differentiated to my satisfaction by having multiple different plume colours. Most of my units, if you noticed earlier, wouldn't blame me if you didn't have distinct plume colours per unit, because that just seemed to be the easiest way to work out which unit was which, but I made sure. But these guys have got slightly fancier shields, they've got more curtains on the front of them, as I call them, and also I give them different plumes colours, so I could work out these are the elite phalangites for the Athenians. It gives them a slight benefit to trying to become back ordered from disorder, basically, but that's just a thing we'll get to if it comes up. And they also got in this division a small unit of slingers, as opposed to the normal skirmishers armed with sticks. These guys can reach out and touch the opponents from a little bit further away. I don't know if it's going to be altogether decisive or not. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Okay, I'll go to deployment now. Right, onto deployment. The Spartans and allies are on the left of the board, and I shall start with them. They've gone with the fairly traditional deployment of put your best troops on the right, barring these skirmishers here, of course. Well, peltasts here, of course. The Spartan command is here. You can see the Spartans with their lambda symbol shields. On the right, they'll be looking to crunch forwards and then turn to roll up the line, traditional style. With their supporting phalanx just in support of them there. Moving along, you have the allied city-state division here, with their commander slightly less encouraging to be out the front. He can command pretty well from behind, to be honest. Skirmishers out in front, peltasts there, and the 2 phalanx behind. Moving across, we'll see the Athenians and allies. Once again, the Athenian division, the best troops, so to speak, on the right-hand side of the deployment. Slightly more phalangites in this division than the others, so they've managed to stack them back a little bit for some rear support and some potential reinforcement should things go wrong. The slingers on the far right hand side, just taking cover in by the riverbank there. Moving slightly across, we have the Boeotian division. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Boeotian at all correctly. It has 2 O's in it and an E in the middle, so who knows. And yes, they are standing steady, hoping to stand long enough for the Athenians to do the heavy lifting in this game. But who knows, they might surprise me. The cavalry at the back, not entirely sure what to do with themselves. They may actually give some command issues to the Athenian side in their attempts to make the best use of themselves, but we will see how that goes. Let's move on to turn 1 and actually get stuck in. The Spartans won the initiative for the first turn, so they kicked off proceedings. They went to their command phase. No one is close enough to the enemy to move under their own initiative, so it's all come down to command rolls. The Spartan commander allowed his allies to take the first move, and they just opted to say, we'll go forwards as far as we possibly can. And yes, from back here they rolled 2 dice against the command value of 8 for their leader, who allowed them to move up twice. So move forward. So each move is 6 inches in Hail Caesar for infantry. So they moved 2 moves directly forwards. Yep. The Spartan commander then said he wanted to move forwards as far as he could possibly go as well, but with the caveat that the light infantry would stop just short of the very small forest there. And but however, as you can see, he rolled an 8 against his command value of 9, which meant he only moves his command only moves 1 move forwards at all, which means they're trailing a little bit behind their allies. Obviously their allies were buoyed up by the presence of Spartans much more and decided to get stuck in, even though the Spartans are moving forward at a much more measured pace. Moving on to the Athenian side, they started off by trying to move their cavalry around the forest, around about to approximately about there, to threaten the Spartan Peloponnese over there, but unfortunately their subordinate commander rolled an 11, which is more than his command value, so the cavalry do not move. That thus means that the entire allied Boeotian division does not move at all, having failed 1 order. The Athenian commander didn't do an awful lot better. All he managed to do was to order up the skirmishers with slings up into range over here, but having done that, he then decided he wanted to push his phalangites forwards against the slightly weaker Spartan allied counterparts, and he rolled an 11 as well, failed his order, and that concluded the Athenian moves onto the combat phase. Right, well, there was only a little tiny bit of shooting on the board. It's not these armies aren't really shooty anyway, and yes, the slingers opened fire at their counterparts. Well, their skirmishing counterparts, shall I say, on the Spartan side. They had their long range shooting. There's only 2 dice, but they rolled 2 5s, which is what they require to hit skirmishers. And yes, there's no saving throw for skirmishers. They have no morale save whatsoever, and that was sufficient to knock 2 hits up onto them. It's not sufficient to cause them any actual other damage in terms of like tests for morale or what have you. So yeah, that concludes the turn. We'll move on to turn 2. Back to the Spartan side, and their second turn was far more interesting than what had gone before. The Spartans themselves in their division, as you can see, have managed to move right up and into the face of their counterparts across the way in the Athenian side. They got a mighty 3 moves potentially, so they managed to complete everything they wanted to do from the previous turn, and a little bit more. The Boeotian skirmishers there, they are very much not in a place they would like to be at the moment. No one would like to be there. The Peloponnese on the Spartan side have stopped short of the wood, just in case the cavalry try to do an outflanking move around first. They're hopefully quite cunning placement for them there. And yes, the Spartans are on the march and ready to face down their much weaker opponents. The Spartan allies, on the other hand, had another interesting turn actually, but not quite so far-reaching. They were also attempted to keep up with the Spartans, but just stop. They wanted to stop a little bit short. They only succeeded in getting 1 movement off, and they stopped a little bit further short than they wanted to. They declared before that they wanted the Peloponnese on their side to tuck in behind their hoplites, because they didn't want to get caught sandwiched between 2 ranks of heavy infantry. The skirmishers, I forgot to mention at the very beginning, before orders were given, actually used initiative as they were within 12 inches of the Athenian slingers. They moved up within 6 inches and threw their javelins back at the slingers. They scored 2 hits which you can see just about there. Crucially, one of the dice was a 6 to hit, which meant that the skirmishers had to take a break test. They rolled very badly. They rolled a 4, which means that if they took any hits, which they had done, they would break, which means these slingers are no longer on the board. Well, let's see what the Athenians make of that. And on to the Athenian reply. The Athenians themselves, down here, they failed their order altogether, rolling just too high to do anything at all. They actually tried to order themselves to charge smack into the Spartan city-state allies, but they failed. Like I said, they failed their order. Over here, with their Boeotian allies, the skirmishers tucked back in around the corner here to try and provide some side support and get out of the way. They could have charged on initiative, but figuring that inviting a premature battle with Spartans is probably not the greatest way to go for them, they decided to hold on. They thought maybe the Athenians could do a number on these guys over here, but it just looks like it was abject cowardice across the entire front, unfortunately, for the Athenians. In a small little piece of good news for them, they managed to order them up and round the side, and they are now poised to threaten the Peloponnese on the Spartan side. But will they get in there quick enough to make a difference to the phalanx battle? I simply do not know. The next Spartan activation opened up unsurprisingly with the Spartan phalanx themselves initiative charging, being within 12 inches of the Athenians. Initiative charging into their ranks automatically. They're locked in combat now. Likewise, their nearest allies as well, crashing into the phalanx on the other side. The Spartan general then ordered the Peloponnese around the back of this forest here, just to tuck them out of line of sight of the cavalry, and it's formed of sort of a phased retreat, I suppose, so that his light troops don't get ridden down, which, yeah, makes perfect sense if you think about it, rather than getting trampled down in the open. He then moved to join this combat here, and he will be adding some dice onto the Spartan phalanx's rolls for the upcoming combat, which I'll do in a separate segment in a little while. Continuing the command phase, the Spartan allies, city-states, having started so promisingly, are now content just to watch as their more fearsome allies do the heavy lifting by the looks of things. They failed their order and stayed back. They wanted to just trot up a little bit, to say about here, in front of the Athenians, just to discourage them too much from deciding to try and any fancy flanking moves on the combat that's already going on. Right, I'm going to move now to the combat phase and roll some dice and crunch some numbers. Well, the dice have been rolled. The Spartans themselves did a pretty bad job, to be honest, some appalling dice rolls, and it wasn't helped by the fact that the Levy phalanx facing off against them decided to lock their shields and fight very defensively indeed, which means that they get +1 on their morale saves, but -1 on their to hit rolls for the Levy phalanx, which overall decreases the chance of them breaking and running, but also means it basically is designed for heavy infantry to drag combats out longer if they want to, and in this case the Levy phalanx certainly do want to do that. They want to tie up those Spartans for as long as possible, and that's just what they did. They only suffered 1 casualty, despite the efforts of the Spartan general there. It was his extra dice that actually did the damage in the end. So if not for him, it could have gone worse. The Spartans back took no damage at all, thanks to the reduced offensive capabilities from the phalanx facing them. But Yes, it wasn't sufficient. In phalanx combat, you have to win by at least 3 points to force a break test on your opponent, and a victory by 1 just means the game will carry on, and fighting will continue. Over onto the allies here, as part of the Spartan division, they actually crunched in their opposite numbers, not levy, but nonetheless also deciding to hunker down behind their shields. They actually managed to do 3 casualties through, and took none back again, despite the Athenian allies having supports from the skirmishers next to them. Didn't actually amount to any casualties back on the Corinthian allies there. So yes, but which did force a break test. Unfortunately for the Spartans, it was a resounding success. After modifiers, they rolled an 8, which meant that there was no ill effect this turn. The combat will continue, and we'll see what happens when the Athenians act next. The Athenian command phase opened up with the skirmishers who were supporting the hoplites over here, tucking in behind them now. The hoplites directly next to them in the Athenian citizen division, about facing like so, facing towards the flank of the engaged Spartan hoplites. That's all they could do. 1 move is all that's allowed on initiative. Not enough to go in. Not that they could have charged anyway. You can only charge what you can see at the beginning of the turn. They were technically out of sight because of the way the vision arcs work in this game. Moving on, the rest of the Athenian lines, the elite phalanx of the Athenians has managed to order itself to crash into its opposite numbers there, and the phalanx that was actually behind the Athenians has moved up to try and fill the gap in the line. Quite professional movement there from the Athenians. Could have gone incredibly wrong. It was a very risky manoeuvre to suddenly present your flank to the enemy and try in the hope that your reserves will cover you. But yes, they managed to get lucky and pull it off in this small action over here. The Boeotian allies division here is mostly embroiled anyway. The cavalry, unfortunately for them, failed an order, so they have decided to just take a little nap over there. Onto the combat. And in the Athenian combat phase, an awful lot happened to recap, so we'll start over here. The Athenian elite phalanx smacked into the Spartan allies, and both sides really went for it. Some significant damage on both sides. Bear in mind, each unit only has 6 hits altogether before it starts, becoming shaken and much inoffensive, shall we say. Both sides did casualties to each other. 3 to the Spartans and 2 against the Athenians. So it's as said before, you need to win by at least 2 in order for the other side to take a break test in phalanx combat. Obviously, this is only a win by 1, so no actual decisive result there. Fighting will continue. Moving over to the other end of the scrum, shall we say. The fighting here continued on. This unit of Athenian Boeotian allies, shall we say, took 1 further hit, took them up from 3 up to 4 now. Meanwhile, the attacks back were much worse and didn't do any damage at all. It was a 1-0 result though, which meant that no break test again. But nonetheless, the lurking threat of the Athenian citizens here is surely going to be playing on the mind of the Spartans as the game continues. The Spartans themselves over here finally started kicking into gear. They caused 4 further hits on the levy phalanx over here, taking them up to 5, but 4 for this particular combat. The levy didn't do too bad in themselves, causing 2 hits back, but they lost by 2 altogether, took their break test and had to withdraw. They got forced back, but they managed to maintain their ranks and stay in good order, which is very frustrating for the Spartans, who pushed on after them looking to finish the job. And maybe finish it they will next turn. And we are now truly embroiled along the entire front line here. The frontage of the line, shall we say. There is no second line anymore, so yes, it's the entire frontage of the game board is now seen to brutal close combat fighting. The Spartan turn has ended up with the other line of the Allied phalanx, of allies, shall we say, crunching into the phalanx of Athenians that was moving up. These combats are still continuing on. The main noteworthy thing was that the Pelters, who were moving stealthily around behind the woods, have actually placed themselves between the flank of their phalanx and the encroaching Athenians here. It's a dangerous move for them, but needs must when the devil drives, I suppose, to try and face down a phalanx. If they can just hold off the flank move charge until the Spartans can do their job, then everything may well turn out rosy for the Spartans. We'll see how that goes in the combat phase, which I shall summarise in just a moment. And back after the combat phase, it was a whole lot of meat crashing and kneading and grinding and smashing together, but ultimately no one broke. No combats actually ended with one side or the other needing to take a break test. There's a lot of single point victories, lots of dice being, lots of little extra hits being added on here and there. Both these units, the elite Athenian phalanx and the Spartan allies here, both flagging quite heavily, having taken a huge amount of punishment each, but neither side looking to give up, knowing that to break now would be to be more disastrous for themselves and their own side anyway. The Spartans crucially can't deliver that killing blow to the Levy phalanx, who managed to tough it out. No casualties are caused by either side at all in this particular combat here. Yes, it's getting quite nail biting now, as both sides could potentially win this quite easily. Onto the Athenian turn. The Athenian command phase was short and to the point. The phalanx here, as the only as yet unengaged phalanx, thundered towards the flank of the Corinthian hoplites and was met by the light infantry peltars trying desperately to screen for the Spartan side. The peltars couldn't opt to evade. If they had done, the flank would have been completely exposed. We'll see how badly that pays off for them. Maybe they can hold the line, maybe they can't. It's in the face of heavy infantry who have something to prove. It will be difficult for them. We'll see how that goes. The cavalry finally woke up and decided to do something. They were able to get 2 moves with a decent command roll from their commander, who was just over here, and they've moved around the back. They now have a smorgasbord of choice of rears and amazingly embroiled units to charge in the next turn, depending in their next turn, shall we say, depending on how things go. The Athenians just need to hold the line. In order to do what they need to do, and it will be very interesting to see how this game pans out. It could go either way. There'll be a lot of combats to come. Just to emphasise how desperate this is, commanders have joined the line, urging their forces to stay put. The commander of the Boeotians has joined their rather more battered phalanx here, not willing to join the levy himself. He can't see them withstanding the assault of the Spartans much longer. The Athenian commander has joined the elite hoplites over here, desperately trying to keep them from failing, because if they fail now, that will potentially crumble up the entire line. Oh, I'm tingly. Well, as the bloodshed continued, things are starting to fragment and deteriorate for both sides. The Athenian elite phalanx managed eventually to win the combat and push back its opponents, the Spartan allies, both sides having taken severe damage up to their stamina limit, so they are both shaken, which meant that the Athenians couldn't pursue their battered opponents away, but does give everyone some breathing room on the Athenian side. This combat was yet again a bit of a bludgeon match, but no decisive result. The unit of Athenian citizen hoplites trying to flank did not manage to break the Peltas, despite causing huge amounts of damage, and and generally taking little in result. They did their job. Unfortunately for them, the Spartan Peltas were made of incredibly brave stuff and rolled a double 6 on their morale check, so they did not break at all. They stood. Maybe they will go next turn. Maybe their sacrifice will have not been in vain. But unfortunately, it was a little bit in vain because the unit that they were attempting to shield actually lost its combat on its own merit, took a bit of a pounding at the hands of the Boeotian phalanx, and managed to break themselves, and they would be picked up off the board. Counter to that, the Spartans themselves finally did their job, broke the levy phalanx, who themselves will also be picked up. In fact, let's get that underway now. And you guys there, come with me. So as you can see, big gaps opening up on the board as units are being broken away. I'll just do some tidying up and then go on to the Spartan turn. The main point of the Spartan command phase began with the well-drilled Spartan phalanx having finished off the levy in front of them and having broken their opponents. They were allowed one move, which they used to pivot on the spot. They used initiative to thump into the side of the recently unengaged Boeotian, shall I say, phalanx there. That's going to hurt a lot. We'll see what happens. And yes, otherwise, carrying along the line, these combats are still ongoing. The Spartan allied commander joined the unit there and managed to rally off one of their 6 hits, puts them back to 5. That does put them back into the fighting and onto the combat. And that just about wraps things up, I believe. I think I'll call it there. The Spartan phalanx, that is, having crunched into the side, routed the phalanx, killed the commander that was in charge of them, and then into the bargain the skirmishers behind also routed, in seeing that the unit they were supporting get seen off. The Athenian hoplites again did a sterling job of defeating the Peltas in front, but could only push them back in disorder, not enough to shake them off, or to remove them from the game already. That would probably put the Spartans crunching into their own side into the bargain, and then just proceeding on as combats continued on in future turns. The other Athenian citizen hoplites finally got beaten by the Spartan allies here and routed themselves. That just left the a unit of shaken Athenian elite phalanx here, and the aforementioned Athenian hoplites here on the board, along with the Boeotian cavalry, who just took too long to get into this position. Maybe one too many wasted turns and failing orders. And yes, that I'm going to say that concludes the game. The Spartan side has won by putting their best units on the far flank, and eventually, albeit eventually, beating their opponents. They managed to roll it up. It would have been a heck of a lot more decisive if they managed to defeat the levy phalanx earlier, but you can't do anything. But inevitably, eventually, it was going to be the case, and the Athenians just couldn't use their superior number of units to their advantage. They got quite unlucky in their skirmishes being seen off relatively early, so that took some of their tactical flexibility away. And yes, that concludes the battle. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. That's the first time I've got to use these models, and I hope to use them many times again against real opponents when lockdown lifts and things will return to some sense of normality. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you with some more battle reports later on. We're going back to Batman soon, I'm sure. Who knows, maybe we'll do some more oddball stuff like this though as well. Thank you very much.